Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Maryland Risk Management Education Podcast. I'm Paul Goeringer. I'm the Extension Legal Specialist here in the Department of Ag and Resource Economics. And today on the podcast, we finished part 2 of the CERCLA air emissions reporting podcast series. I started with the last one. This one, we're going to talk about where we're at with the law right now, some of the reporting issues that we've been finding, and working with producers to kind of understand this issue. I have a guest on the podcast today to kind of talk about what they're doing in industry to kind of help people understand this and kind of give you more of a background. This person deals with it every day. I'll wait till we flip over to the recorded version of this to let that person introduce themselves. So today we're going to do a little bit of talking about this CERCLA reporting and follow up with what we talked about on our last podcast. And with this, I'm going to introduce Ashley Ellixson, who has been on the podcast before, but she was a legal specialist here when she was, and now she is the VP of Legal and Environmental Affairs with United Dairymen of Arizona. So hello, Ashley.
Hi, Paul. Glad to be back.
I'm glad to get you back on and find a reason to bring you back to be on the podcast. So as you probably have dealt with over the past few months, what can you tell us about CERCLA reporting, and what do producers need to be aware of as they start to fill out these reports?
Well, I'll go back a little bit from, I guess it's almost been a year. And I think your previous podcast went over the actual court case that all of this has resulted in. So from there's been a few motions to extend the stay to report. So myself and obviously many other industry groups have been watching this closely. So we anticipated having to report in November. Well, as we all know, EPA filed a motion to extend that stay, and that was subsequently granted by the court. So we were anticipating again reporting on January of this year. And again, EPA went ahead and filed a motion to extend that stay, and it was granted again. So at this point, we are now anticipating to report in May of this year. With that said, last week, February 13th, there was also a bipartisan legislation presented that would exempt industry from reporting. So there seems to be two avenues that we're looking at right now. So industry groups, we are part of National Milk Producers Federation, and our industry group is representing us at the Hill and trying to push that forward along with many other industry groups. I know pork, poultry, everybody is participating in that. So not only are we present on that front, but we're also looking at, well, if that doesn't happen and we're going to need to report, what is that going to look like? And I was on an EPA phone call a few weeks ago that was open to industry group leaders and farm bureaus and things like that throughout the nation. And EPA admittedly, said that some of these calculations aren't science-based, or there just isn't science-based calculations that would support a broad range of issues out there in industry. So what we've been doing is working very close with our industry group to come up with a report that if we do need to report or tell our producers to report, that EPA is going to work closely with that particular industry group and link their report back and forth between each other. So between EPA's website and National Milk's website and other industry groups similarly, since the industry groups are better fit to come up with these reports since they know what their producers are doing and what they're looking for. So that's what we're hoping to see. I know that there's not a whole lot of science out there for, well, what if my cattle are on range in upstate Utah? And what does that mean to me? Well, these are the types of questions that EPA has been getting. So I know that EPA has been working really closely with the industry groups, and the industry groups have been working diligently to come up with something that is easy for a producer to fill out and that could, potentially, if there was some sort of citizen suit, because there is a provision under CERCLA for that it would stand up in court to some extent. Because like I said, there isn't a whole lot of science-based facts and methodologies to support some of this reporting. So anyways, I probably rambled on way too long, Paul. Is there anything you would like me to clarify or talk more about?
Yeah, you brought up one good point, and you talk about some of the numbers the producers have to run. We are really looking at them just trying to take a best guess, aren't we, as to what their emissions are based on if nobody that's listening to this has looked at the EPA website, you go down, you scroll down, you fill out a worksheet basically, and try to take a best guess as to kind of what you think production practices you have, manure management you have, and it kind of gives you an estimate that may or may not be right for your farm. Basically.
Right. Yeah. So that's where
Yeah.
a lot of pushback has been, because this does seem somewhat arbitrary, because there isn't really, like I said, science-based methodologies to support this. So when I was on the call with EPA, they basically said it boiled down to, you can look back on past release data or engineering estimates, or, fill out right now what the report might be, make a best guess, and that's going to just have to stand on its own. And that's just kind of what they said. They said, make a best guess, have a business management practice to support it, write it down on a piece of paper, file it away, and that's going to be that. So it does seem it's definitely up in the air. So I think that's why EPA is working very closely with industry groups, because there are so many questions surrounding the methodologies. It is a best guess right now. So right now, if we were to have to report today, I would tell our producers, here's the worksheet, the most current worksheet that we've been provided, and, fill it out to the best of your knowledge with the cattle that you have, and go from there. And that's what's going to have to stand.
Yeah, and it kind of shocks producers when they learn that they're just doing a guess. They're not actually doing anything that's really, because I know we've done some workshops here with producers, and that's kind of gotten them that, oh yeah, we're just guessing at this. There's not a lot of, there's science behind some of it, but some of it is not in the state where you're currently located.
Exactly.
So is this actually
Sure.
correct?
And then it comes into play with temperature. So I'm out in Arizona. So our dairies are going to have, different emissions than Maryland dairies, just because of the temperature, the humidity, and things like that come into play. Like you said, that was a really good point, Paul, that some of the research that's been done, it's great. The methodologies are great, but it's not going to apply across the board.
Yeah. And that's going to be a huge problem, I think, for producers to get. And you talked about how industry groups are working on reports that producers can fill out. This is to solve the problem currently with the report that's on EPA's website that's designed for a much more industrial process.
Right.
That's not a farm. And this is to help make it easier for producers to fill out. Because I know here we've been telling people just to fill out a piece of paper and write this information down on it that you may have to use to report later on at some point.
And then I would follow up with make sure as a producer that when you fill out that report, make a copy and definitely have a filing system for it, because you're definitely going to want to hold on to that paperwork on how you came up with what you did, so you can show that it was somewhat thought out and there was some methodology behind it, even if at the end of the day, we know that it's still our best estimate.
Yeah, and that's going to get some people down the road. That's just the best estimate. Circling back to the act that was introduced last week, and this would take away a lot of the problems that we're currently seeing, to where EPA really has no idea how to implement this court ruling, and producers have no idea, how to actually go about doing this as well.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, I know for us personally, I'm anticipating doing a workshop for our producers, but because of the different stays and the reports aren't finalized, I've definitely put that off, because, Paul, getting farmers to a workshop is, they're out there working. They're not going to take 2 hours out of their day just to come and then have to come back a month later because things have changed. So I'm waiting for things to get finalized. So right now, our producers don't know how to report whatsoever, unless, of course, they've read some of the emailings we've sent out and things like that. But as far as sitting down, filling out the report, making the phone call, doing the email, whatever it is that they decide initially, going on the website, et cetera, that's a process that we haven't walked through step by step yet here.
Yeah, as I say, here we've just walked them through. I think at the first of the month we walked through, and then later with poultry producers at 2 different workshops, and then we're going to walk dairy producers through it in a couple of maybe next week. And the whole point has been, this is what you're potentially going to have to do. Now, make sure we have your contact info so we can let you know when this actually has to be done, because if not, you're not going to know when to do it, because it's pretty hard to keep up with the court stays. Because with the last court stay, the deadline kind of passed before the court actually stayed.
Yeah, so that's what's difficult too, is to watch that. Yeah, I'm anticipating putting something together March or April for our producers. So hopefully we'll know more by then.
Yeah, and then we could end up with another stay out of this whole thing. We never know. I mean, EPA's had some good arguments as to why it should be stayed in the past, so maybe it'll get stayed again.
It does seem, I was just going to add, sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it does seem that the court seemed to say to EPA, use this next 90 days to really put pen to paper and figure out these methodologies in the reporting. It seems to me, if I'm going to be a betting person, that I feel like we're gonna have to report in May, but we'll see. I feel like the court's like, okay, we've given you time, get your work done. So hopefully EPA continues to work closely with industry groups, and I would just recommend that producers, talk to your industry groups. They'll keep you up to date, and that they'll probably most likely have the report that particular industry should be filling out at the end of the day. And then I know EPA updates their website, so check back EPA's website and try to stay on top of it. And there's going to be a lot of information. So I think everyone's working really hard on this.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone is. And yeah, industry groups will probably keep you best up to date. Extension is trying to keep you up to date, but we don't have the latest forms sometimes because we may have not seen them as well from some of the industry groups because they don't usually trickle their way down to us sometimes. Not that I have a problem with that. It keeps me off the hook sometimes for knowing what the things are, but at times it can be difficult with this. But we are trying to keep up to date, at least to let you know when you need to be reporting and when that final date's going to come. Well, Ashley, anything else to add in on this topic?
I don't think so, not yet. I hope to be talking about it here in a few months and maybe with a lot more detail.
I think we would all like a lot more detail on this topic. I think it's the topic where all of us just kind of live in a bubble and we're like, well, maybe this is what we're supposed to do. I know I did put together numbers so dairies could kind of figure out what they were supposed to do here. And I still have no idea if I put it together correctly.
I think that's how everyone feels right now.
I mean, it was just it's just a best guess that I think this is the proper way to do it. And I've had a couple of dairy people look it over and they're like, yeah, that's close enough. I'm like, well, it works for me then. So if you have nothing else to add in, thank you for joining us today on the podcast, Ashley.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. Always good to be back on the podcast with you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's always good to have people on that kind of know the issues who can explain them to us. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email at lgoering@umd.edu or tweet me at agalawpaul, and please send any ideas for future episodes that way as well. I'll also put Ashley's contact down there as well so you can get in touch with her if you have specific questions with anything she talked about today. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.